Part 1. The calm before the roar, 700 words, the plains of Vorthon 6 stretched for thousands of kilometers. A seemingly endless ocean of wind-swept grasses and silver-leaf trees that shimmered beneath the light of twin suns. It was a peaceful world, untouched by the centuries of war that had scarred most of the galaxy. Its people were simple. Farmers, historians, scientists. No armies, no weapons, no concept of war beyond dusty archives that changed the day the Kareth Dominion arrived. The Kareth came not with diplomacy, but with dominance. Massive black cruisers descended from orbit without warning, flanked by atmospheric suppression drones that silenced communication across the planet. Cities that tried to call for help found their towers crumbling under sonic bursts. Villages that resisted were simply erased with precision orbital strikes. Vorthon 6 was claimed in less than a day, and the galaxy said nothing. Why would it? Vorthon was insignificant. No strategic resources, no military bases, no alliances. The Kareth took it because they could, because the universe had grown used. Two empires flexing power over the powerless. The Vorthanes submitted. Their culture prized life over resistance. They laid down their tools and offered tribute. Better to bow than to die. But not everyone accepted the silence. When the Terran, diplomatic frigate Lita's Hope, was destroyed in orbit during the Kareth siege unarmed, neutral craft carrying several human scientists and diplomats, the situation changed. The Dominion denied responsibility. It claimed a stray meteorite caused the explosion, then immediately declared the matter closed. But humans don't forget their dead, especially not when they died quietly. Without justice, Earth had no colony on Vorthon 6, no stake in its economy. But it had principle and a very old, very quiet rule in its military archives. If you strike one of ours, we'll return the blow. For 3 weeks, Earth said nothing. The Kareth mocked the delay. They had fought human fleets a century ago and survived. Earth, they believed, had grown soft-reliant on trade, diplomacy, and obsolete codes of honor. Then the black cubes arrived. They fell from orbit like meteors, slamming into the soil outside occupied cities with alarming precision. 10 meters. Tall, smooth, seamless, without markings or windows. Some embedded in the ground like teeth, others landed upright, their surfaces shimmering faintly under the suns. The Kareth assumed they were probes, relics of Earth's outdated warfare. And so, they ignored them. But the tremors began the next morning. At first they were minor, slight shaking underfoot. Atmospheric monitors blamed tectonic drift. But the patterns didn't match. The quakes came every 6 hours. Exactly. Then every 4. Then every 2. By the 6th day, Kareth soldiers stationed near the cubes reported headaches, nausea, and strange vibrations in their armor, their energy readings. Scrambled. Their scanners could no longer see inside the cubes. When they tried to breach one with a plasma lance, the weapon melted in its operator's hand, and the cube emmed just once. A deep, low frequency that cracked the glass of nearby buildings and dropped birds from the sky. The Kareth High Command ordered all troops back from the landing zones, and still. The tremors grew stronger. That night, deep in the darkness between the twin moons, one of the cubes began to unfold, not with a hiss or whir of hydraulics. It bloomed like a metallic flower petals of armor folding outward, mechanical arms locking into place, and from within, a giant limb emerged. It struck the soil with the weight of a meteorite. The ground rippled, the sky vied for, and from beneath that cube, now revealed to be a mobile war foundry, something rose. It was massive, 40 meters tall, plated in onyx black alloy, humming with reactors that pulsed like a heartbeat. Twin. Barrels mounted to its back crackled with blue light. Its eyes zipped. Their eyes glowed dimly red. Scanning the horizon with cold precision, the first Kareth patrol to see it screamed into comes a beast. A metal beast. They were half right. It wasn't a beast. It was Omen 7, a Terran heavy-class combat walker built not to defend, but to end. And somewhere inside its cockpit, a human commander sipped her coffee and calmly activated a firing sequence. The Dominion had awoken something ancient. Part 2. Footsteps of a Colossus. 700 words from the safety of his command outpost. General Carvash of the Kareth Dominion peered across the Vorthan plains with a growing knot of unease in his chest. Vorthan 6 had been a quiet, effortless conquest, until now the tremors beneath the surface were no longer tolerable. Background noise? They were growing stronger, sharper, almost intentional. His elite scout teams had not returned from the southern region where the black cubes had first landed at first. Carvash had dismissed the report's geological disturbances, his engineers claimed, but now instruments were malfunctioning. Short-range comms were down. Drones launched to investigate either vanished or returned with corrupted data feeds. Something was interfering with their sensors, and the pattern was too perfect, too deliberate. Then came the sound. Not a blast, not a scream, a boom low, primal, and powerful like a cosmic drumbeat, shaking the marrow of the planet itself. It echoed across the plains. And with it, the ground beneath the Dominion's fortified positions trembled not like a quake, but like footsteps. Giant ones. Carvash raced to the ridge and activated his high-spectrum optics. His enhanced vision cut through the swirling dust on the horizon, and then stopped. Something impossibly massive moved across the landscape, looming. Above the silver grass was a colossus, blacker than the night sky, with jagged angular armor that looked more grown than forged. It had no curves, no grace, just pure, brutal function. It stomped across the plains with deliberate, earth-shattering steps. Every impact sent dust clouds into the air and cracked the soil in wide spiderweb patterns. This was no ordinary war machine. This was a Terran combat walker. It wasn't walking. The Dominion base erupted into chaos. Pilots scrambled to their interceptors. Defensive cannons swiveled toward the approaching machine. The walker didn't slow. Carvash barked orders. Fire all forward batteries, engage and disable it. The walker raised its right arm, if it could be called that, and a cylindrical cannon extended forward. In a single blinding flash of light, a bolt of kinetic energy burst out with enough force to tear a Dominion assault crawler in half. The shredded vehicle spun into the air before cratering back into the soil. Still, the walker advanced. Fighter craft shot forward from the launch bay, unleashing a volley of plasma bolts. The Colossus raised a shoulder-mounted shield generator, absorbing the energy blasts like dust in a storm. It retaliated with twin rail-mounted turrets that fired in rhythmic, synchronized bursts. 2 fighters disintegrated mid-flight. Third veered off and collided with its own fuel depot, igniting the western sky in a mushroom of flame. The Dominion. Soldiers began to panic. They had faced war machines before, biomechs, tanks, synthetic enforcers, but nothing like this. This wasn't just a piece of war tech. This was a moving fortress, a god of steel and thunder. From within the cockpit of Omen 7, Commander Rhea Malkin monitored the chaos with practiced calm. Her neural interface fed her real-time battlefield updates. Casualties, minimal, active. Status, advancing. Enemy resistance, escalating. She tapped her comm line, targeting array online. Fire at will. The walker responded to her thoughts before the words even finished leaving her mouth. Wow. Rockets launched from its back, hissing through the air like vengeful banshees. The blast radius consumed a full wing of Kareth defenders, a Dominion artillery. Team attempted to reposition its rail cannon atop a rocky plateau. Rhea marked the coordinates with a thought. Seconds later, the plateau was gone. From the rear of the battlefield, more Terran constructs began to rise, smaller than Omen 7, but no less terrifying. 2-legged exosuits, mobile drone swarms, unmanned. Tank units, all deployed from the once inert black cubes. Each one coordinated, silent, and surgically efficient. They didn't roar like beasts. They moved like predators. KAR. Vash's command team fell into disarray. Shouts filled the bunker. Retreat? Counterstrike. We call for reinforcements? He knew deep down it wouldn't matter. This was no longer a battle. It was a message. The Kareth had awakened something ancient, something patient, and cold. This wasn't vengeance or rage. It was worse. It was protocol. And then cutting through the chaos of the open came a voice. Calm, human. Squad Delta, flank left. Charlie, drop EMP drones. Forward units, advance and reload. Was when the Kareth realized the roars weren't coming from monsters. They were coming from humans. Part 3. Roars of steel and flame, 700 words, the battlefield was ablaze. And yet, the true inferno had only just begun. The Dominion's once pristine forward operating base outside Vorthan's capital now looked like a war god had struck it with a hammer. Charred debris littered the ground. Anti-air platforms smoldered. Downed fighters sparked with dying systems. The Kareth soldiers, those still alive, scrambled in broken formations, shouting into static-filled comms, desperately trying to regroup. But order had already died, and in its place stood Omen 7. The Terran combat walker, its massive form wreathed in smoke and flame. Rail cannons on its back rotated slowly, clicking into place with methodical finality. Its armor-layered alloy, hardened against nuclear impact, dripped molten bits of Kareth war machines from its last few kills. From a distance, it looked like a god of vengeance had torn free from a mechanical tomb and decided this world would feel its wrath to the Kareth. The sound of Omen 7 was unbearable. Every step was a thunderclap, every weapon discharged deep. Concussive blasts that shattered eardrums sounded like the roars of ancient monsters. And yet amid the thunder came something far more terrifying. Language. Unit 3. Suppress Northeast Quadrant. Reload protocols active. Engage auxiliary drone package. The voice came over openfrequency.com. Authoritative. Human. It wasn't a monster roaring. It was a commander directing. The Kareth soldiers paused, stunned. One lieutenant dropped his weapon entirely, staring at the Colossus as realization crashed over him like ice water. This thing is not autonomous. A human is inside that thing, commanding it like it's a suit of armor. It was a horrifying thought. Dominion battle doctrine warned of Terran unpredictability, but this wasn't unpredictability. This was mastery, the kind of control born from a species that engineered its own extinction repeatedly and clawed its way back each time. The Dominion tried to recover. Fresh squads arrived in skimmers, attempting to flank from the south. One platoon fired a volley of magneto-piercers, hoping to rupture the walker's shielding. Omen 7 didn't flinch. Instead, it kneeled. The sudden shift in posture sent a shockwave through the dirt, knocking several Kareth troops to the ground. From its back, a cylindrical chamber hissed open, releasing 6 autonomous combat drones. Each the size of a large wolf, gliding low over the terrain with pulsing red eyes. The drones didn't waste time. They sliced through the flanking squad like scalpels, through flesh precise, silent, and unrelenting. Within 15 seconds, the entire southern flank was erased. From inside the cockpit, Commander Rhea Malkin watched without blinking. Her neural interface synced directly with Omen 7's battlefield suite. She saw the terrain like a living map. Colored silhouettes marked friend from foe. She could feel her walker's joints hum, its cannons charge, its shields flicker with kinetic absorption. Rhea wasn't piloting a machine. She was the machine. Northwest corridor compromised. Re-engage. Reload. That last word echoed across all frequencies, carried by both the walker's external speakers and the open. Comes reload to the Dominion. It sounded like death's bell. To the Terran soldiers now flooding in behind the walker, it was a cue. Behind Omen 7, dozens of Terran drop troopers marched in perfect formation. Each wore an exosuit tailored to environmental warfare's leak, modular, and built for both mobility and lethality. The Dominion had assumed they were reinforcements, perhaps scavengers picking over the walker's wreckage. They were wrong. The Terrans advanced like predators. They said nothing, and their movements were smooth, efficient, and devoid of hesitation. Each unit coordinated with the others through neural pings and eye-gaze targeting. They swept through the ruins like ghosts of iron and fire, gunning down Dominion resistance with shocking ease. The Kareth defenders were stunned by the sheer discipline. These weren't berserkers. These weren't bloodthirsty monsters. These were soldiers calm, trained, and efficient. And they were everywhere. A Kareth captain tried to mount a final defense, calling in an airstrike from a nearby dreadnought. The massive vessel appeared in low orbit, aiming its belly cannons at the Terran advance. Then it blinked out of the sky. One orbital rod, fired from a distant Terran cruiser parked at the edge of the system, turned the dreadnought into a glittering smear of light and dust. The Kareth never even saw it fire. That was the moment Dominion morale broke. Not when they were overwhelmed. Not when their defenses crumbled. But when they realized that even their backup, their final hammer, meant nothing. Because Earth wasn't responding with rage. It was responding with methodical eradication. And in the midst of the storm, walking like a god of vengeance was Omen 7, glowing red in the dusk. "Reload complete," came Rhea's voice, soft and certain. The Dominion now understood. The roars they'd heard weren't from monsters. They were from human weapons, the hands that wielded them. Part 4. The last mistake of the Dominion. 700 words. By the time Dominion Command realized the scale of the disaster, it was already far too late. What had begun as a planetary conquest, clean, efficient, unopposed, had become a slaughter. But not one of civilians. Not of rebels or planetary defenders. No. This was a surgical extermination of military assets by a species that no longer saw war as conquest. Humanity, as the Kareth Dominion now understood, fought only when the line had been crossed, and the Dominion had leaped over that line when they destroyed the Terran diplomatic frigate Lita's Hope. What they assumed would be buried in silence had instead awakened a force they didn't comprehend. Not brute force, not chaotic aggression, calculated retaliation. In the command center of the Kareth Dominion's planetary control core located, in the capital city of Valthar, Prime General Karvash stood amid a war room filled with flickering screens and panicked voices. Red indicators spread across the holographic map like wildfire. Entire battalions had gone dark. Supply chains were vaporized. Air superiority had been erased in hours. "Where is our orbital fleet?" he demanded, clawed hands gripping the table. A junior officer turned, visibly trembling. "Gone, sir. Struck from long range. We never saw the enemy vessels." Kavash's jaw clenched. "How many Terran warships are in the system?" A pause, then a whisper. "Unknown. We believe they are outside the system, using kinetic launches from deep space." That statement chilled the room. The Terrans weren't even close in yet. They struck with godlike precision. Then came the feed, one of the few surviving reconnaissance drones. Circling far above the eastern plains, captured the full horror from the sky. On the massive screen, the Omen 7 Walker marched across the land like a titan.
Oh.
Behind it, Terran drop teams cleared the remaining Dominion forces with stunning ease. Support drones flew in perfect formation overhead, laying down cover fire with deadly precision. And directly in front of the Walker, a clear path. No Dominion troops, no structures, no traps. Just an open, unbroken corridor leading directly toward the capital, toward Karvash himself. The silence in the room was deafening. Everyone understood what this was. It wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a statement. Karvash staggered back. Why? Why leave that corridor open? They could bombard us from orbit, destroy the city in seconds. A voice from behind spoke softly. Because they want us to see them coming. And then, as if on cue, the ground beneath Valthar Prime began to tremble. The same rhythmic pulses that had once shaken the outposts now reached the heart of the capital. Windows vibrated, lights flickered, sirens blared. The people of Vorth and Kareth, citizens, workers, bureaucrats, rushed into bunkers, unsure if it was an earthquake or the end of days. It was neither. It was a human war machine, calmly marching forward. Karvash turned back to the map. The Terrans hadn't attacked a single civilian center. They had bypassed population hubs, even ones used as cover by Kareth defense forces. The Terran walkers' weapons, no matter how powerful, were surgical. They struck only what needed to be destroyed, and it made everything worse. This wasn't conquest. This was discipline. A Terran vessel appeared in low orbit, just enough to cast a long shadow over the capital. Its hull bore no weapons. Only one message beamed on all frequencies. To Dominion Command, we are not here to conquer. We are here to finish. Your mistake has reached its final consequence. Karvash fell into his chair. No demands. No negotiations. No interest in diplomacy. This was not revenge. This was a correction. He watched as Omen 7 stopped just kilometers outside the capital. The walker stood still, red optics locked onto the control core. The clouds above swirled unnaturally vapor. Trails from kinetic rods already preloaded for a terminal strike. And yet, nothing happened. Not until the speakers on the Terran ship spoke once more. Stand down, or we continue. Simple. Brutal. Final, the Kareth had thought they ruled through fear, through shows of strength. They believed no species could match their ruthlessness. But what they saw now was not ruthlessness. It was restraint. Because the humans could have turned Vorthan 6 into glass. They could have extinguished an entire Dominion fleet from a distant star. And yet they chose precision. They chose mercy. They offered a single, silent path to survival. Karvash closed his eyes and issued the order. All Kareth units stand down. Full planetary surrender. And just like that, the roar stopped, the ground stilled, and humanity's message had been heard. Part 5. The silence that followed 700 words. For the first time since the Kareth Dominion had set foot on Vorthan 6, the world was silent. No more tremors beneath the soil. No more roars of plasma cannons. No more panicked screams or battle cries. Only the steady wind moving across the silvergrass plains, sweeping ash into the horizon like the closing curtain on a stage of war above the capital city. The Terran command ship hovered in low orbit, unmoving and silent. It didn't unleash final vengeance, didn't broadcast threats, simply remained an eye in the sky, watching, waiting. The message had been delivered and it had been understood. Inside the Kareth Planetary Command Center, General Karvash stood before a cracked screen, hands limp at his sides. He watched as Dominion soldiers, one by one, laid down their weapons across every region of Vorthan 6. His own guards removed their armor and helmets in solemn silence. There was no need to fight anymore because the enemy had stopped moving. The Omen 7, the Terran combat walker that had driven terror into the heart of the Dominion ranks, now stood motionless just outside the city. Its red optics were dimmed, its weapons were locked. But its presence, its very silhouette, still felt like the shadow of judgment. Inside the cockpit, Commander Rhea Malkin sat quietly. Her systems showed full surrender, no incoming threats, no remaining resistance. The neural link faded from her spine, and the glow of the interface slowly dimmed. She took a deep breath, reached into the small utility hatch beside her seat, and pulled out a thermos of lukewarm coffee. Surrender received, she said, her voice casual. No further action required. The war, if it could even be called, that was over. But what lingered in its wake was fear, not from terror, but from comprehension. The Kareth now understood what humanity had become, a species that did not boast, did not posture, did not flex power, unless necessary, but when called upon, delivered force with surgical, unstoppable certainty. The rest of the galaxy watched Vorthan 6 in stunned silence. The broadcast had been picked up by dozens of neutral systems, despite Earth's attempts to keep the response localized. Pirate, lords, warlords, and expansionist regimes who had once laughed at Earth's diplomatic dependency were now silent, because Earth had shown its hand, and that hand could crush empires if it needed to. 3 days later, the diplomatic follow-up team arrived, not with soldiers or tanks, but with architects, doctors, and mediators. Terran reconstruction drones worked alongside terrified Dominion engineers to stabilize cities, rebuild bridges, and bury the dead with ceremony. Humanity was not there to conquer, it was there to restore. One Dominion soldier, barely out of his youth, approached a Terran medic hesitantly. He trembled, expecting punishment or mockery, but the human just handed him a ration bar and nodded. Eat. You'll need your strength. The soldier didn't speak for several minutes, and, in a quiet voice, he asked, "Why didn't you destroy us?" The medic paused, then answered, "Because we weren't here for you. We were here for ours." It echoed a philosophy that now burned itself into Kareth records and galactic memory. Earth doesn't start wars, but it finishes them. In a private meeting days later, General Karvash was permitted to speak with Commander Rhea Malkin. Under a white truce flag, she arrived alone, unarmed, wearing only her exosuit undershirt and a long coat. She looked ordinary, like any woman in a Terran crowd, but Karvash knew the truth. She had commanded gods of war. "You could have glassed us," he said, voice heavy. "We could have," she replied, sipping her coffee. "You didn't?" he pressed. "Why?" Rhea looked out the window, watching the silver grass sway in the breeze, because this was never about revenge. "We don't waste fire on those who surrender," Karvash swallowed. Then what was this about? She turned back to him, her eyes unreadable. This was a message. To you, to the galaxy, to anyone who thinks silence means weakness. Then she stood, offered a brief nod, and left. Later, the Kareth Dominion would retreat from Vorthan 6, ceding the planet back to its people. The survivors would rebuild, this time under Terran protection. Would not annex it, nor exploit. It simply stood watch like a silent beast, slumbering again, but never forgetting. And so, the galaxy learned. The ground had trembled, like a beast's rage, but what came after was worse, because the beast could speak, and its voice was human.